What is up, my fellow Titans? Welcome to my Titans Season 3, Episode 5 recap, breakdown, and review. And now this episode is titled Lazarus, very fittingly. And this is the episode I've been trying to tease you guys about, waiting for that extra context. Not only that, giving us a new paved way in the DC Titans lore, if you will, which remains true to super traditionalist canon, if you will, yet also being innovative. There is just so much to talk about, so many goodies. The surprise character that I teased of Leslie Tompkins, which really was a pleasant surprise for me. And also just, of course, the Bruce Wayne and Jason Todd scenes. I'm sure there are all kinds of opinions all over the place with this episode, but let's just get right into the details. But as always, guys, go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. It really does help feed that YouTube algorithm, and subscribe for more Titans videos like this. But let's get into the beginning of the episode, and that is right off the bat of the end of last episode, and that is with Jason kind of recovering right after Barbara deployed that sniper shot that clipped Nightwing. Now, the interesting thing I actually didn't notice the first time I watched this quite a few weeks ago now is that Jason sees Nightwing in the reflection. Now, in this new stamp on the Red Hood storyline, as I said, with writing Batman out the show more or less, even though he is still in it, of course, as you see him in this episode, and we're still probably going to see him, obviously, with Tim Drake in the fold as well, but they needed to write the Batman aspect of this out due to the limitations of the show, yet also still remain faithful to what the Red Hood storyline is. And as I've said before and time again, that I do feel like they're doing a fine blend of the source material, handshaking, new innovative material. Now here, what I'm trying to get to is that Nightwing is kind of what Jason is seeing as his somewhat adversary, if you will. He's the one he's projecting his frustrations out on. Of course, it affects all the Titans, Hank, but you can kind of see where his mind is at, especially when you take into consideration the lines in Crime Alley between Bruce and Jason. We'll get into that heartbreak a little bit later, but you can see how they slightly deviated more Red Hood onto Nightwing. But obviously we had some lines between Scarecrow and Jason. You can see where the power dynamic is. Jason is just very furious. He's just like, I need another plan. I need another freaking plan, which yet again further emphasizes that while Red Hood is capable in many ways, he is still just Jason Todd. And Jason, I wouldn't quite call him a kid, but he's far from a, an adult vigilante with so much prowess in his field. He is relying on Scarecrow for the plans that have happened this season thus far, but now we get the context with the 3-month flashback, because 3 months ago was right at the end of Titan Season 2 when he rode off on his motorcycle away from the airport. And you also get the next course of action for the plan of Gotham, with Scarecrow saying, the plan is simple. We immerse the good citizens of Gotham in a world of fear and terror where there is no one to protect them. Then we swoop in and be the answer to their fear. Feed the starving dog, the dog will always be at your side. So if any of you guys have seen the leaked set photos with those posters and the Titans and whatnot, I'm not going to give it away, but this will probably pertain to all of that. Now, as for the actual first scene in the flashback, this is where it says 3 months ago, and I have to admit, even this dream confuses me a bit, just because it's a dream he's having 3 months ago. If it was a dream he was having in present day, it would make more sense. And to be honest, that's more the way I'm looking at it, because how does he have a dream about, Red Hood being in it when he's not even Red Hood? So I feel like this is more of a larger symbolic thing, even outside of it just being a flashback dream. Now, people are wondering, I believe, who that character is. I always assumed that was Red Hood. I mean, he's holding a gun up. You can hear the voice modulator of Red Hood. I find this super interesting on a few levels, because you see Jason running away in the Robin costume, and he's quite scared of himself, the Red Hood version of himself, the voice modulator talking to him. Now, talking about in the Hank episode, the split personalities of the phone call, I don't think they're going that way with everything we've learned. That was just Jason trying to lure Hank. But then you get a scene like this where we have Jason in the Robin costume running away from himself. So it kind of like rubs into that split personality scenario even more. But as I said, I don't think they're doing that at all. I think it is symbolically that way. So when Jason does take the anti-fear toxin and everything else that he's been through, that is a person who is without any empathy. He is quite ruthless because he doesn't feel what he does to people like Hank and stuff. So I think he is scared of himself. Yet again, though, it's just kind of confusing to put that dream in a flashback of when he hadn't even become Red Hood yet, because it just feels more relevant if Jason had a dream like that in present day, where he's doing all of these bad things, but you maybe start to see some of the cracks, like him being scared of himself and he's running away from himself. That would actually be pretty dope to put in present day, because it would also show he's maybe starting to feel a bit of remorse when he's not actually on a current dose of the anti-fear toxin, so he just has to keep taking it to completely blot that out. But also, Donna! What are you doing here, Donna? Now, Greg Walker did say at DC Fandom last year, we're going to be having an underworld kind of experience or story with Raven and Donna this season. This was definitely Donna an underworldy kind of vibe. And honestly, I can't really explain it to you, because I've already explained how it's kind of confusing that this is a dream he was having 3 months ago before he became Red Hood. And here she says you still have time. That is, I think, very obvious in how he can still come back. Maybe, you know, you don't have to go down the dark path, Jason. You know, all of that kind of vibe. But once again, it just felt very random to have this sequence 3 months ago and then shove Donna Troy in there when it's a dream and it's not. Yet again, this would make more sense if Jason was near death, and then somehow, like, Donna from the plane of the underworld was trying to reach through. But guys, finally, actual scenes between Bruce and Jason. This leads us into the surprise character that I was teasing you guys about, and I think people were, you know, understandably, I think people just go mega hype and think, oh, Boba, mate, could he be teasing Talia or something like that? No. I was genuinely just saying this was a really pleasant surprise character for me. I really like Lee Tompkins or Leslie Tompkins, and the fact that as soon as Bruce said this, I was like, oh, you know, like, we're going to see a Titans iteration of that character, which I feel like fit in very well with this episode, exploring. It was a perfect way to kind of explore what is going on in Jason's mind at the end of season 2. And also, may I say, and no matter what you think about Bruce Wayne, or Bruce Wayne is coming across as a bit of a dick, as I said, I think they were deliberately trying to cast that light on Batman and Bruce, because in this episode, you can actually see how much Ian Glenn's Bruce Wayne has grown and learned from his past mistakes with his first son, Dick Grayson, because in this episode, and we're going to travel into this psychology of Bruce Wayne breakdown in this review quite a bit, because I adore it. You may still not like the casting, but other than that, I mean, I do. I feel like this was amazing Bruce Wayne material, because as I've just mentioned, he wants to look after Robin in this episode. He wants to give him literal therapy. He tries to send him to Leslie Tompkins before just boldly sending him out there to keep maybe messing Jason up, because Bruce is noticing that he's been having nightmares for the past few weeks. Now, those past few weeks link back to the events of Titan Season 2 in the Titans Tower, where he was almost jumping off the tower after everyone was blaming him for all the antics that Deathstroke planted around the tower. I'm just trying to take your minds back to that. This is only a few weeks after he fell out the tower, so he's still very much so being haunted by the kind of post-traumatic stress that would kind of cause anyone. I mean, even though he's Robin, this is one of the major undertones to this episode. I mean, think of the contract between Dick Grayson and Bruce, where it said, blah, 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 Dick Grayson will not give comfort, love, nor fear, or whatever to fear. There's a terrible abbreviation, but you know what I'm trying to say. This is why it's so important for Jason to not let that take over him, yet the more he tries to resist, the more it keeps clawing its way in. And, you know, the poor kid. On that note, by the way, just want to give a shout out to Smart Sheep. A lot of you wanted to see Ian Glenn in a cowl, and also this is based on the Titan Season 1 Trigon reality manipulation Batman. Do you remember when we got that stunt suit? Well, this is a mock-up of that suit, but slightly more, like, improved, because it was just a stunt suit with Ian Glenn in it. Now, if you can't see Ian Glenn in the bat suit, because I've been saying all along, put Ian Glenn in the bat suit, even put me in a little bit of armor, I would look more intimidating. Well, do that to Ian Glenn. I'm sorry, but that's a relevant Batman. I know we don't see it, but I just wanted to give you the headcanon of what he would look like in the suit. Anyway, though, we have Jason going into Gotham, and we see him meeting his friend Molly. They catch up a bit, but he also finds out that Diego from the shelter went missing, because word on the street is that the Joker's got a dude taking in strays. Joker, you sick. I don't even want to know why Joker is getting a guy to take in a bunch of street kid strays. But either way, this is quite close to home, because Jason is a street kid. I'm sure Molly is as well. Jason basically wants to go where that guy is who's picking up the street kids. So, and obviously, this makes sense for the character, because he's Robin. Think how many little crooks he's gone up to like this. So he has that overconfidence, but yet again, he also doesn't necessarily have that at the same time, and this also just adds more and more and more. Yeah, again, it's like adding weights on the scale, like a few pounds at a time. It's just adding on that weight of mental feckery that Jason is going through with what happens in this scene. So initially, he goes up to the car and we hear that guy saying, "What if I told you that I could introduce you to someone that could make you smile all the time?" Yet again, Joker, what the are you doing, dude? But also, I love the little, you know, I mean, they're Robins, of course, so of course Robin would have a little Wayne Tech phone that can scan the face of the criminal and know exactly who this guy is right off a little brief distance shot. Jason walks right up to him, very confident, and the reason why he wants to prove himself so much, and you could argue even cocky, he goes right up to the guy's face like, "You have no idea who I am." Jason, don't forget, guys, he is just a kid, and what he's been through the past year, which is traumatic, so really he's a horse who's being kicked whilst he's down. He's still trying to compensate or overcompensate for that through doing things where he's actually kind of quaking in his boots a bit, but he's still trying to, like, you know, show his strength at the same time. Yet once again in this moment it cracks because he gets like pistol whipped, well, he has a gun to his face, and it just goes wrong. So once again Jason is getting kicked whilst he's down. This is something that he as Robin should have been able to handle very easily, even in front of Molly, who was getting a bit sus of how Jason was able to find everything out about this guy. But what I wanted everyone to make sure they took away from this scene is that Jason's already got fear issues as it is, and this is only going to rub it in even more. Because you would expect, right, for him to bring out his Robin skills, like one of the first episode we saw him where he completely wrecked all those police officers, but this just makes him feel even more beaten, weak, humiliated, and it will only exacerbate his symptoms of fear and insecurity here by tenfold. But how about Dr. Lee Tompkins? So I really like this. I really, really like this. What a way to kind of get into it a bit more, crack Jason's vulnerability out into the open a bit more. We learn in this iteration that Jason's mother was a smack addict and it killed her, and his dad was murdered by Two-Face. So I do want everyone to always bear in mind each layer that's being offered to who this character is and why it also turns out the way he is in present day, being Red Hood. But this is where we actually learn that Lee Tompkins used to know Dr. Jonathan Crane, and how he wasn't actually the Scarecrow when Lee Tompkins knew him all the way back then. He was actually a brilliant graduate student. However, he was obsessed with fear, driven by ego. He had a real insight, and he was Lee Tompkins' friend until he tried to kill her by using his fear toxin, and if it wasn't for Bruce, she would be... Yeah, we do get a cool little Superman Easter egg with her saying, "Come back and we'll try again." Might even tell you a story about Superman. And ladies and gentlemen, I told you we'd see even more of the Batcave, and we see Batman's little vault where he keeps his most prized possessions by the looks of it. So we literally see Scarface. Scarface! He's in there! Well, I mean, I love this. I really love this. I don't know about you guys, but this is Easter eggs galore. On top of all of the stuff we've already seen in episode 1. We see Two-Face's coin. We see 3 Joker cards. I believe that is meant to be a blade as well, that Bruce probably had when he was training with Ra's al Ghul in this iteration. I mean, unless I'm being really stupid right now, those symbols carved in is probably like the blade of the demon's head that, you know, Ra's gave to Bruce because he kind of probably wanted Bruce to take over, but Bruce just kept it as a trinket anyway from his days of training. And of course, we also have Catwoman's goggles and her whip, which means, you know, I don't see why Bruce would have that in there unless she had passed away. Now, they were, with what we get teased with in a minute, in a relationship in this iteration still, but yeah, I'm guessing maybe she died in Gotham, maybe just like Jim did and whatnot as well. But I loved all of this scene because the Scarecrow mask just looks incredible, and I want to see that, but I don't know if we are going to see it just because it's in the Batcave. So unless Scarecrow literally goes in the Batcave and takes it, or Red Hood does, I don't know how we're going to see Vincent Kartheiser with that on. I feel like Vincent Kartheiser this season might just be playing the Jonathan Crane role, but my god, if we see him in that mask is perfection. This is what I mean about the production of this show. It is mwah! And I love seeing Glenn in complete black attire, if you will. It just it makes the more Batman vibes come out. This was a really special scene, not as emotional as the Crime Alley one, but this is what I mean, guys. Like, to all of those shitting on Ian Glenn all the time. I feel like, or not even that, even if you aren't doing that and you're just shitting on the Titans, Batman and Bruce, I feel like this episode walks a lot of it back. Not actually deliberately backpedaling to be like, oh guys, we're catering to you now. It's just that we're getting the context, actually how he isn't a dick, or now that he has learned from his lessons. So when they're first talking about the therapy, Bruce discusses how people underestimate the power of fear. Leslie did as well until she ran into Scarecrow and she was lucky to survive, and it made her a better therapist. And I love that line of Jason saying she's kind of hot. Like, did you do? And Bruce immediately changes the subject as to how there's something going on in Metropolis. Luthor is up to something, so Batman's going to Metropolis. I love all of this because it sets the imagination off. So we know that Batman's going to Metropolis to probably help out Supes. So there's something going on with Lex, and he didn't want to answer the conversation, or the question, should I say, about how they've blatantly had something in the past together, Bruce and Lee Tompkins. Oh my goodness. Some people might really not like that because in various iterations, Lee Tompkins is an old woman when Bruce is just a kid, for example, when his parents die. But in this iteration, it's obviously a little bit different, and this is what I mean. Adaptations, absolutely fine. I have zero quarrels with that. I think one of my favorite parts of this, and this goes more in line with the Crime Alley discussion, is seeing that side of Bruce where he is learning from his mistakes, and also he is caring. He's not a sociopath, psychopath. So Barbara's comments from episode 1, don't get me wrong, it's a very valid opinion and perspective, but everyone has their own opinions. Doesn't mean that judgment of a certain person, that the way they're seeing it, for example, Bruce, and what I'm trying to say here, is doing all these things that person is accusing them of. That's not the way Bruce is seeing how he goes after Robins. He's not actually manipulating them and turning them into a weapon and taking advantage of them. He actually sees it in a completely different light. That's the key thing I love about Titans here. Whereas you have Barbara looking at it quite objectively saying this is wrong. And the same would be said for any comic book panel of a Batman and Robin. It's always pretty messed up in a very objective and non-biased filter on it. However, regardless, when Bruce says here, you know, seeing Leslie was a huge step to being back on track or getting back on track. I know it wasn't easy. I'm proud of you, son. And Jason's like, son? And this is where it really starts to make things a lot more sentimental, thus why it's so much more hurtful for Jason later on. He's like, yeah. And they have a moment, very sweet, the music is all there, the score was absolutely beautiful, and this was really nice, and the comment as well at the end. And he was like, the Bugatti is gassed up, and if this new girl likes cats, run. And that was a lovely little tip to Jason reference about Catwoman. He's lived through it before with a woman who's been into cats, and it's caused him a bit of issues. So Jason, there's a tip for you. But the therapy continues. A little bit of a word association stuff. San Francisco, Rose, father, Bruce, mother, gone, friend, Molly, Robin, freedom. And this is where I really appreciate Jason's perspective. Like, from here on out, the context really weighs into you. So Lee Tompkins talks about the scene with the gun pointed to his head the other day with that guy, and Jason explains it. If he thinks I'm scared, he'll what? I can't be like this. I'm tired of being afraid, freaking out all the time, the nightmares, the hand shaking, all of it. Once he loses faith in somebody, he takes it all away. Now, Jason's obviously terrified of losing his Robin position. He's got, like, think of, right, so you really have to put yourself into where Jason came from. A street kid. Mum was a crack addict, died. Dad murdered by Two-Face. Then he was given this opportunity, taken in by Bruce, sees him as a father figure. Yet again, this is kind of leaning into the fact that Jason has felt abandoned his whole life. And the one thing where he did get accepted and taken into a fold of something outside of foster care is, think about it, Robin. So what made him Robin and Bruce take him in? Literally being Robin. Before that, who was he? Jason. What happened with Jason when he was Jason? His family abandoned him. His mother. His father died. He was nothing on the streets. The thing that gave his life purpose is Robin in his mind, and it kind of was at that point. But yet he doesn't realize that he doesn't have to be that to still have a life and a father figure like Bruce. But obviously, hearing what Bruce says in the next scene that we're about to get into, it does come across in a way, especially to somebody who's been hurt in the past, it just reopens wounds. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is when Bruce Wayne picks Jason up from his appointment, and he drives Jason and himself to Crime Alley, because this is something that was very hard for him to do, but he wanted to take Jason to a place of where speaking what he does would make more sense than anything. And I feel like this scene is so important, and it was so well executed by both actors. Karen Waters gave everything in this moment. Ian Glenn was cracked down to a point of duality of Bruce Wayne and Batman, and opened in such a way that you don't often see, yet is so relevant and pertains to the character and the plot that is going on at the moment. So this is where Jason says it's where your parents died, and you see the stage door of, you know, where the Waynes came out and where they would have got shot. They're standing right where it happened. And this is what I mean, guys. And I really would be so kind of sad to hear if nobody took away what I've taken out of this. I mean, it's very obvious people will, but there are some who still somehow this will fly over their head, but this couldn't be more accurate. Ian Glenn's Bruce has learned from Dick Grayson. This is very good character progression and development in my mind, because he says, everything I've done is to help you, son. And Jason's like, I know, and it's so sad because you know kind of where Bruce is going with this, and Jason's just like not really cottoning on to anything. But when he says, and what he identifies, what I brought you into, Robin, it's tearing you apart. Now, does that sound like a guy, and I get it, like Bruce is technically mentally ill with his own perspective, but this is why I don't view this Titans Batman as a dickhead, psychopathic, child abuse, or whatever people say, because the way he views it is not the way Barbara articulated it. Because why would he be a guy who deliberately targets kids to weaponize them and manipulate them into his own mold if he's literally saying here, what I brought you into, Robin, it's tearing you apart. It wasn't fair of me to push you. Do you see what he's saying? Like, he rather drop a Robin if it's doing this to the kid than manipulate them into a weapon. Do you see what... I'm gonna stop saying that there, because I feel like that just says it all. This Bruce Wayne doesn't just turn children into weapons. He does care, and this scene is it. But I also do, to also contrast that, like how they get into Bruce's darker mode, because the line of what he says next really sums up his own self-introspective identification of slight errors of his ways. So he says, this city does things to us. It can take the worst parts of ourselves and put them in control. Sometimes I think it's alive, like it has a will, and it wants to us to destroy ourselves. So the main part of that line, and I don't want to do too many line dissections, but I feel like this one is quite important. He says, this city does things to us. So this is a Batman who's been around for decades, decades, and decades now. He really has. He's done the Killing Joke. He's been through various bits and pieces. You can see that through the memorabilia in the freaking Batcave, the trinkets, the story of where Barbara's already at. So he has got to a point of where he looks back at himself now and realizes that he himself, this city does things to us. It can take the worst parts of ourselves and put them in control. So I take that as Bruce admitting that Batman and himself as one person this city has taken the worst part of him and put that in control at points. Even though he was still doing the noble Batman crusade kind of thing, he probably is admitting in this moment that Gotham has allowed him to make some mistakes and put that part of him in control, and that was probably what he did to Dick, for example. But here you can clearly see that he's identifying that, and also just the performance of Bruce as he's kind of like looking side to side. Ian Glenn here, just it's like he's really, as Bruce Wayne, trying to figure this out, what this city and Gotham does to him. And it's like it has a will, and it wants us to destroy ourselves. And that's when he says, I've lost too many people to Gotham, I won't lose you. And so he says, you can't make that promise, but I can keep it. I don't want you to be Robin. And Jason's face. Now, obviously, with the context that I've given and you guys understanding how this kid has been through so much abandonment, you're automatically going to think this is another powering off session, or Leslie Tompkins, your therapist, is complete. Of course she's spoken to Bruce. Like, yeah, of course she said something after I've opened up and got vulnerable with her. Once again, somebody stabbed me in the back kind of thing. And not that I want to put too much of this in Titan Season 2, but a lot of this similar kind of thematic stuff happened to Jason again. Of course people did this to him. Of course the Titans, you see what I'm going with here? Jason feels like the one time he opened up and finally thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to let my guard down. If I open up and this doesn't get me kicked out of being Robin, fair enough, I'll do it. So he couldn't feel any more betrayed in this moment through opening up about his mental health, that he thinks that's why he's getting chucked. Ouch. Not that it is, but it's the only way he can see it. And I love how they play the perspective from both sides, because you really can see both sides. You can really see how Bruce really feels like this is the best thing to do, and you can really almost understand and completely support him, yet you also really completely support Jason, because he's been doing everything Bruce said. He's been going to Leslie, he's talked to her, she's helped him out, and then he says, that line where he says, please don't take this away from me, Bruce. You can tell, if you're going to say one more word and take away from me, that is going to be like puncturing his sternum and ripping his heart out. And unfortunately, that does happen. The sincerity of the music alongside Jason's pleading is genuinely what made a tear roll down my face, and that was the second time after watching it today again, as of whenever I'm recording this. And you know that Bruce isn't being a dick at all in this moment, because that line, this destroyed me as well. You know, you don't need to wear a costume to be my son. So the fact that Bruce is way more than happy enough to have that relationship with Jason Todd, the kid he took in, and to have a parental relationship with him, shows that he just wants Jason. He cares more about him than him being Robin. He's doing this out of the best intentions and good aspects of his heart. Yeah, obviously to Jason, it does not appear that way at all. And then again, just also bringing in that reflection right at the beginning of the episode when he sees Nightwing. And this also fuels that angst against Nightwing a little bit more in this situation, and that's the innovation that I kind of speak about, because he's like, so Dick Grayson, you think I'm weak. You always thought I was weak. You never did this to Dick. And he's like, that's a different matter. And it kind of is. Like, people are different. And clearly Jason's struggling. Like, but yet again, to Jason, it's like, Dick Grayson, of course, the boy wonder. Like, but me, so I'm a effing mistake now. And Bruce is like, this is how most arguments go in the world, I swear. Otherwise, no arguments would happen at any time. And that line, what's so bad about me? That's a question he's probably been asking himself at every point or every day in his life, because he's always been abandoned. What's so bad about me? And once again, he's not really being abandoned. It's just Robin being taken away, but yeah, you can understand the significance of this to Jason Todd. And so the scene ends with, please don't give up on me, Bruce. Once again, cracking my emotional frickin' spectrum. He says, I never will, but I've made my choice. And I really do feel like people say like Bruce Wayne, or should I say England's accent, or that he doesn't sound like Batman. And I know the accent was a bit dodgy in season 2, just accent-wise, but as for voice, like, even on the plane in the first episode, you know, where he's just like, stand down, Jason. I feel like he really does sound like Batman, like 3/4 of the time, like, seriously. And also, by the way, can I just chuck in, after all of this context now, after Bruce, like, this was also hard for Bruce to do, by the way. It really was. And also how he's confessing he wants to be Jason's father. Imagine the guilt he had after episode 1 and then Jason dies. Like, he will feel indirectly responsible for, I know he didn't do anything wrong, but he tried doing the right thing and it upset Jason, and then he went and got himself killed. Try and add that context into Bruce's mind and psyche before he goes off to crowbar the Joker. He is probably being ridden and gulled and eaten up alive through thinking about the scene in Crime Alley. Even though he was doing the right thing, it still in retrospect makes you feel so guilty that this kid, after my not confrontation, but that scene in Crime Alley with him, he went and did that. And maybe if I never did what I did through trying to take Robin away from him, but in his best interest, he might not have ever got himself killed. You need to try and understand all of this in Bruce Wayne's mind. It's just, I love the rich detail they're giving to this iteration of Titans and Bruce Wayne and the Red Hood in general. This backstory is sublime, in my opinion. So we see that Jason goes to Scarecrow in Arkham, and this is where their relationship starts. And one of the biggest cruxes to obviously Jason's problem, and as to why he couldn't be Robin, is because of the fear, and he wants to stop being afraid, his hands shaking, just everything. We've seen the perfect examples of that with him going up to that thug who worked for the Joker this episode, and just everything else. So he wants Scarecrow to make him an anti-fear toxin, because he obviously knows that he made the fear gas, which means now surely he can make something to get rid of fear. The very bad thing about this is that Jason just stabs Batman completely in the back. But once again, I feel like given his motivations through how abandoned he feels, he thinks screw everything, let alone with the amount of fuel that Jason has to do something like this. So he reveals to Scarecrow that he has one of his fear gas chambers, if you will, and that completely makes Vincent Kartheiser's intrigue of Scarecrow absolutely engrossed. He's like, a collector's item from a very specific collector. But the question is, how did you get your hands on it? He is absolutely fascinated. And I love, Vincent Kartheiser's performance this episode as Scarecrow was spectacular, and probably one of my favorite scenes in any kind of Bat lore ever, which I will get to in a little bit, and trust me, stick around to find out what that is for me. But obviously he put 2 and 2 together, and who else could get this other than Batman's Robin, because he thought that Batman destroyed all of those. In order to give Jason the anti-fear toxin formula, if you will, he wants to know everything about Batman, everything about everything, all details, a granular look at his operations, things that only you would know. And one more thing, I want out of this place. And I love this line. And I don't just want out, I want Robin to fly me out of here on his wings, the same way Batman brought me in on his. There's a perverse poetry, and it makes my heart sing. These lines for Scarecrow are definitive. I love it. That is so, sorry, excuse me, but that was beautiful. That would be the one thing he would say in a scene if it would play out like this, if he were to learn out about who Batman is. It's just, thank you, Titans. This was a fantastic scene. And so we see Jason rent out that space that Dick Grayson found out about all those episodes ago. Here's a little bit of a montage with creating a anti-fear toxin, should I say. Eventually, though, he takes a hit that makes his eyes go green, and it basically kind of makes him high, like drops to his knees, yet again, in apathy. And this is further instilled in our minds when he goes back to Crane. Crane says, "Let me see the eyes," and he's like, "Well done, my boy." He says, "How does it feel to be fearless?" And he says, "I don't feel anything." Think about it. If you don't feel anything, do you really think Jason would... It just explains a lot with the actions that you've seen him do to the Titans and killing people even for the bombs. Yes, I know it is a big leap in terms of that is bad. How can you come back from that? But I trust that if you're thinking he is chemically imbalanced through literally not feeling anything, well... Jesus, I feel like if you gave that arc to a lot of comic book characters, it could be pretty interesting. Give that to Batman. Give that to... He would probably be ruthless and actually maybe even kill if he doesn't kill anything, if he doesn't feel anything. Give that to Superman, Green Arrow. Imagine what all of these things would do. Then give it to a kid who feels abandoned, who has a lot of motivations that I feel like they've stacked quite nicely, like a little Jenga tower, seriously. And now... The anti-fear thing is like taking a Jenga piece out and it's crashing down, and Jason is now becoming Red Hood, and that's a weird-ass analogy I can give. This then leads into the connection to the first episode, where there's only one way to truly know. We need to test our concoction on Batman's most fearsome enemy, which brings it to 3 days later. Jason finds Joker. Can I just add this into the context? He took the anti-fear stuff, which gave him the apathetic and overconfidence vibes to go after the Joker, and he still gets crowbarred. Can you imagine, once again, the not even the humiliation, but the trauma? Yeah, I think there's enough justification for this Red Hood. Also, just how we cut to Scarecrow and Arkham, and how the guards inform them that Joker just killed Robin, and his face couldn't look any more like he's got the most diabolical, gleeful feeling that he's ever had, and he's just... That could be a couple of things, like he's just done something that he didn't have to even leave Arkham for to get to Batman. So Batman's Robin dying is kind of an indirect kind of thing that Scarecrow did, but also it's for the bigger plan that he has that is revealed now. So let's get into this, guys. We see the body bag zipped up, and we know that got zipped up and from the precinct's CCTV. So this is finally getting into those questions now. And we see then that the body bag is getting dragged to some dark place. And we see Jason's face when it's unzipped. And my God, guys, I was so grateful they did this, because I was like, holy crap, this is actually dark. Like, Joker went ham. When he crowbarred Jason, he died. You saw his teeth. So you know your back teeth and whatnot, like they were showing through where his cheek used to be. I can't even show this on screen because of how graphic it is, because of demonetization purposes, but if you brighten that up, or if you just go back and watch it, his face was... There were lumps in his face, and he was dead, and I just felt like, poor Jason. After all the context and tragic kind of sense that was made apparent in this episode, it's just, you feel like, Jason, man. But then, he was put in a pit. The Lazarus pit. And it's not green, it's glowing like a bluey greeny hue. It's weird, but the waters bubble, it latches onto Jason's body, and he rises with his wounds kind of like feeling out and like fumbling and like draining off his face. It's like it bubbled out from the inside out. And yeah, what a way to do the Lazarus pit. Now, the interesting thing here is the reveal from Scarecrow, because we have Jason wake up and all of that, and he says, you're safe. You know, Jason's pretty terrified, obviously. He's like, Bruce, you know, he's like, no, there's no Batman here. The Joker, like, where am I? Like, he obviously just died, so he's really spooned out. And he says that you're in the only place in Arkham that a fella can get a modicum of privacy. So, yeah, I mean, Arkham, I don't think we need to discuss the kind of corruption and just how everyone escapes from there. So, I totally do believe that there's a place where villains and inmates can just chill out. He says that, you know, you should be really thanking Ra's al Ghul. He left a tiny puddle of mysticism that even your friend Bruce Wayne didn't know about. Now, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, you would have thought Bruce would not... I mean, at the same time, you know, it's not like Ra's al Ghul maybe would have told Bruce everything. So there are multiple Lazarus pits. I think a lot of us know that. It's just, where is this Lazarus pit? That's the thing. I want to know how Scarecrow found it. Does this mean that the Lazarus pit is literally underneath Arkham? If that's the case, do all the inmates know about it? Does this mean an inmate can just go there and just bathe in the Lazarus pit if he wanted to? I feel like there's a bit of ambiguity there that... I do understand how you can have ambiguous scenes and it does serve the story, but here it's just like, okay, well, I do have genuine questions, like, why doesn't Batman know about this? I can swipe that to the side because he doesn't need to, and I am fine with that, but then why does Scarecrow know about it? But then I could be fine with that because it's like, or maybe he stumbled across it in Arkham, but then it's like, how does, like, do I really expect all the Arkham inmates to keep quiet about a reviving Lazarus pit, you know, resurrection pit? So I don't know. Either way, I thought it was a really cool way to do it because this is what I mean. It's still really true to the comics. He got revived, literally resurrected back to life through the Lazarus pit. However, it wasn't Talia or Ra's al Ghul, and you know, this is what I mean. If you're not going to do Batman, then this is what I meant. Like, how are they going to do Ra's and Talia in the whole pit there? So they did like a cool little innovative twist on that, but there is still some answers I wish they did give a little bit. But with the Lazarus pit and it just being a little puddle of mysticism, as Scarecrow said, I suppose they capitalized on the mysticism part. And now Scarecrow is living his best life. He got put in there by Batman. Now he knows everything about Batman, and he knows he's got a complete power dynamic and balance with this kid who he's got complete manipulative control over, because he's also just brought him back after he just died at the hands of the Joker, so he's probably even more traumatized now, and he's completely playing him like a puppet master almost. He also tries to give him, and he did whip up, I do want to add this to add even more context. He says, time for your medication. I cooked you up an extra special dose. So this dose is even more, probably makes him even more apathetic. So Jason naturally takes that after what he's been through, and then he looks even more, as I keep saying, apathetic than ever, like zero emotions. So he is ready and willing to be Scarecrow's little soldier with the plan that he's weaving. You're going to give this city what it really needs, with no hesitation, no guilt. New mask, new name, new you. We'll punish all of them for what this city has done to us, and then you'll be their symbol. And that is going into how he wants to, they're going to try and frame it, if you will, that Red Hood is the one to be favored over the Titans. And but first, to do that, they're going to have to cause some anarchy in the city for them, I suppose, to poise themselves up, or Red Hood up, as the saviors. So yeah, a grand plan from Scarecrow, but I love how he was like dancing to that record. Like, that was so good, because it was just so Vincent Kartheiser's Scarecrow. It was brilliant, because I also like how he was dancing like this, because it was also like a Scarecrow, if you know what I mean, as if his arms were like pitched up like this, and he could move it a bit, but they were still remaining up like this the whole time, and even his stiff movements were this kind of creepy, poetic, kind of chilling dance, and it was just it was truly a scene. Like, you wouldn't want any other takes, because they already captured it right there. Not that, I mean, for all I knew, this could have been the 5th take, but you know what I'm trying to say. I feel like this scene was quite a dynamite scene. I really feel like this is now just starting to bring, this is what I mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is only just bringing Vincent Kartheiser's Scarecrow to fruition, and if you like this, yeah, I feel like Titans cooked up something pretty good with this Scarecrow and Red Hood partnership iteration here. Not only that, guys, I do want to say, not that they have leaned into this, but usually in the comics it's pretty canon for when you get brought back in the Lazarus pit to not be the exact same version of yourselves. So like, for example, in even Arrow, they try to go the bloodlust route, but even in the comics, you don't come back like, oh, I'm nice guy Jason, just like how I was before. You normally do come back with a bit of an edgy version of yourself. So that can also play into all of this as well. Like, I feel like they truly have layered and layered and layered and layered and layered their own sandwich here as to why all those people who said, oh yeah, there's no way Jason's gonna be justified being Red Hood, this is too rushed. Well, I feel like this has done it in their own unique way. But yeah, I always feel like you ain't seen nothing yet when we hear Scarecrow say, oh, Gotham, you ain't seen nothing yet, and he just laughs and cackles away. It always reminds me of Jerome from Gotham in the GCPD when he's just like, you ain't seen nothing yet, and this cuts to a montage of him being suited and booted. I'm sure some fans do have questions as to where or how he got that suit. I wish that as well, because at the end of the day, how did you get that suit, Jason? I think it would have been pretty cool, but maybe it was cut for episode time if he went to the guy who forged the Nightwing suit and obviously the original Robin suits, and like maybe he just held him through gunpoint or something. That could have just been easy. It's just like, if you don't make me a new suit or something, I will kill your family. I don't know. And so we see Red Hood go after the guy who put the pistol to Jason's head earlier on in the episode. So this was kind of like some Red Hood outlaw action here, like anti-hero action, because he also saved Diego, the kid that they were going after at the beginning, or trying to find out answers for at the beginning of the episode, and he ends up shooting that guy. Like, you know what, I'll tell them myself, you know, when he said to tell them about Red Hood, which is obviously referencing the scene to when he met all the mob bosses of Gotham. Yeah, he most certainly did meet them himself. So at the very end, we see him return Diego to Molly so she can help him out, and he says it's going to get worse before it gets better. So really now we have a Red Hood with a new purpose, added context of abandonment, fulfilled even further and propelled by this drug that gives him complete apathy, and also he's been brought back through a literal Lazarus pit of resurrection. This guy's been through a lot. I think it's understandable, and I think the cherry on the cake here is the fact that he has a chemical that also is really kind of changing his brain chemistry a bit and making him very docile to Scarecrow, but also apathetic where he doesn't feel what he's doing. So as I said, I feel like for me, this does bring the justification and context that we needed for Jason to become this new evolved version of his character, the Red Hood. But now, you know, because this video has been going on for way longer than what I planned it to, that it's time for you guys to tell me your thoughts. What did you think? Did you like the context here? Do you feel like what I've teased about this being the episode for context gave you the context you were seeking for Jason Todd's character development into Red Hood this season? Do you feel like it was a new, nice, innovative take, whilst also remaining faithful to things like traditionalist canon with things like the Lazarus pit and whatnot? I feel like it did. And then the Ian Glenn scenes. Do you agree with me about the take on Batman being very relevant here and how he has learned from season 1 and 2, and how there's really good introspective dialogue there from Bruce realizing that about himself? I could go on forever, which is why this video went for a long time. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. We've got another sweet episode next week with some surprising things that I didn't expect once again. So like this video if you did enjoy it. It really does help out. And if you got this far, let me know by putting in your comment, if you were going to leave a comment, the hashtag Lazarus, baby. And that is everything other than top pin comment has some links to my social media, which you guys should definitely check out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Titans in the next video. Goodbye.